Hi, I'm Emma Reeves. 3 months ago, I woke up in a hospital bed with metal pins in my leg and my parents' empty chairs beside me. No note, no explanation, just discharge papers waiting for a signature they wouldn't provide. Before we jump, back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They thought a paraplegic daughter would drain their retirement fund. They even cleared out my apartment while I was in surgery, donated my clothes, and canceled my phone plan. But I didn't disappear like they hoped. A physical therapist named Marcus believed in me when no one else would. And then that insurance check arrived, the one my father had assured the hospital would never materialize. The look on their faces when they saw it in my hands was worth every painful step of recovery. For the first time, I had the power to say one word I never thought I'd get to say to the people who raised me: goodbye. The rehabilitation center smelled like industrial cleaner and false hope. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling tiles, counting each one as if they might rearrange themselves into a future I could recognize. 38 tiles across, 22 down. Outside my window, Portland's constant drizzle painted everything, in shades of gray, matching the fog in my mind. Dr. Williams had just left after delivering what he called realistic expectations. The words hung in the stale air: incomplete spinal cord injury, partial paralysis, months of rehabilitation, years of therapy. The car that had careened through that red light had taken more than just my ability to walk. It had stolen the life I'd carefully built. My phone chirped from the bedside table. My mother. Again. I didn't reach for it. The last 3 texts had been variations of the same theme: logistics, practicalities, concerns about insurance. Not once had she asked how I was feeling. Emma? A nurse with kind eyes peeked into my room. Your parents are here. I nodded, tried to sit up straighter, winced at the pain that radiated from my lower back. The perfect daughter even now. Always presentable, always agreeable. 29 years of performing, and here I was still at it, broken body and all. My mother entered first, Diana Reeves, former beauty queen turned real estate mogul, not a hair out of place despite the rain. Her Burberry trench coat was buttoned precisely, her Coach handbag hanging from the crook of her elbow. Behind her came my father, Charles Reeves, with his perfectly trimmed silver hair and Brooks Brothers suit. They were the picture of upper-middle-class success, the kind that gets featured in community newsletters. Oh, Emma. My mother's voice had that practiced sympathy she used with clients who couldn't afford her listings. She didn't move closer, just hovered near the doorway as if my condition might be contagious. You look better. I didn't. I knew I didn't. My hair hadn't been washed properly in days, and the hospital gown hung loose on a frame that had lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. But I nodded anyway, the good daughter. The doctor wants to discuss your discharge plan, my father said, checking his watch. He hadn't looked directly at me yet. There are some financial considerations. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. Financial considerations? My mother set her purse down carefully on the visitor's chair, not sitting. The insurance situation is complicated. Your policy might not cover the extent of this. She gestured vaguely at my legs, covered by the thin hospital blanket. And the rehabilitation facility Dr. Williams recommends is out of network. I don't understand. I did, though. I was beginning to. My father cleared his throat. We've been talking, your mother and I. We're not in a position to cover these kinds of expenses, Emma. Our retirement isn't as secure as we'd hoped, especially with the market downturn. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You're worried about money? Right now? We're being practical, my mother said, her voice stiffening. Something you've always struggled with. The words hit like another car crash. I'd been the responsible one my entire life. The straight-A student who turned down art school for a sensible business degree. The daughter who joined the family, real estate business instead of traveling. The woman who saved 40% of every paycheck while my younger brother blew through his trust fund with no consequences. The hospital social worker gave us information about state assistance programs, my father continued, pulling a folder from his briefcase. And there are group homes that specialize in cases like yours. Group homes? The words came out as a whisper. Dad, I'll recover. The doctors said with therapy. Let's be realistic, Emma. My mother's tone was the same one she used when I'd wanted to go to prom with the janitor's son. You need to adjust your expectations. You'll need care for, well, who knows how long. I looked between them, these strangers wearing my parents' faces. So, what are you saying exactly? My father finally met my eyes. We're saying we can't do this, Emma. We've worked too hard to throw everything away on indefinite medical bills. The truth hit me then, clear as the monitor beeping beside me. I wasn't their daughter in this moment. I was a liability, a bad investment, a drain on resources. I was something to be managed, minimized, perhaps even discarded. I see. My voice sounded distant, belonging to someone else. And what about my apartment? My things? My mother fiddled with her wedding ring. We've taken care of that. Your lease was month to month, and it didn't make sense to keep paying rent on an empty apartment. You got rid of my apartment? The room was definitely spinning now. Where am I supposed to go when I leave here? That's what these programs are for, my father said, tapping the folder. They'll find placement for you. Placement, like I was furniture, like I was something to be stored away. There's something else, my mother added. The insurance adjuster called. They're disputing the claim because you were technically working at the time of the accident, showing that property on Hawthorne. But I was on my way back to the office. It doesn't matter, my father cut in. The point is, don't expect a settlement to solve this. Our attorney says it could be years if anything comes of it at all. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe through the panic rising in my chest. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When I opened them again, my mother was checking her phone, and my father was looking out the window at the parking lot. Could you at least bring me some clothes from my apartment? My laptop? My voice cracked. Some pictures? My mother's expression shifted just slightly. Discomfort, not compassion. We've already donated most of your clothes. Space is limited at our house, and we didn't think. Well, many of them wouldn't be practical now anyway. I felt something break inside me, something fundamental. The last thread connecting me to the daughter they wanted snapped clean. You got rid of my things? All of them? We kept important documents, of course, my father said, as if that made it better. Get out. The words didn't feel like mine, but they kept coming. Get out of my room. My mother's eyes widened. Emma, you're being emotional. Get out. Each word was a stone I'd been carrying too long. If I'm such a burden, such a financial liability, then just go. You don't get to throw away my life and then stand there checking your watch. My father's face hardened. You're not thinking clearly. When you've calmed down? I'm thinking perfectly clearly for the first time, I said. Please leave. They exchanged a look I'd seen 1,000 times. The one that said I was being difficult, unreasonable, not living up to the Reeves family standard. My father tucked the folder of state assistance programs under my water pitcher, and my mother adjusted her purse strap. We'll check in tomorrow, my father said, when you're feeling more rational. They left without touching me, without a backward glance. I watched the door close behind them and felt a strange lightness beneath the devastation. For 29 years, I'd been trying to earn the love of people who saw me as an investment. Now the pretense was gone, stripped away by metal and trauma and the cold calculation of what I was worth to them. I pressed the nurse call button, wiped the tears from my face with the rough hospital blanket. "Yes, honey?" The same kind-eyed nurse appeared. "Could I speak to the social worker, please? And maybe a phone? Mine seems to be disconnected." She nodded, her expression telling me she'd heard at least part of the conversation. "Of course, Ms. Reeves. And for what it's worth, some families, they just can't handle the shock. Sometimes they come around." I nodded, not believing it, not wanting it anymore. "Thank you." When she left, I looked out at the rain-soaked city and made a promise to myself. If I had nothing left, no home, no belongings, no family willing to claim me, then I had nothing left to lose. And there was a strange power in that, a freedom I'd never allowed myself to imagine. The social worker who came to see me that afternoon wasn't what I expected. Marcus Delaney was tall with a neat beard and arms that suggested he understood physical rehabilitation from more than just a textbook perspective. He didn't sit in the visitor's chair. He pulled it closer to my bed and leaned forward, elbows on knees, as if what I had to say really mattered. "So," he said after I'd explained my situation, "your parents have withdrawn support. You have no place to go after discharge, and they've essentially told you that you're on your own." I nodded, grateful for his directness. That's about it. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell me they'd come around. Instead, he pulled out a notebook and started writing. "Okay, let's focus on what we can control. First, housing. There's a transitional living facility connected to the rehabilitation center. It's not perfect, but it's clean, accessible, and they have staff around the clock. I don't have insurance for that. My parents made that clear." "You have Medicaid," he said, looking up. "I checked your file. Your employer's insurance may be disputing the claim, but you qualify for Medicaid now, and they can't deny emergency coverage. We'll get you enrolled today." A small spark of hope flickered. "Really? Really? And about that insurance dispute, I know someone at the state insurance commission. The fact that you were driving between work sites doesn't automatically disqualify you. We can fight that." For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt a tiny bit of control returning. What about my stuff? My parents got rid of everything. Marcus's expression darkened slightly. "That's legally problematic. They didn't have your power of attorney. We can address that too, but first things first. Let's get you stable medically and with housing. Then we'll tackle the rest." He stayed for over an hour, walking me through forms, making calls, treating me like a person instead of a problem. Before he left, he handed me his card with his cell number written on the back. "I know this feels like the end of the world," he said, "but I've seen people come back from worse, much worse. The road is long, but you don't have to walk it alone." After he left, I stared at his card for a long time. Outside, the rain had stopped, and a thin strip of sunset was visible between the clouds and the city skyline. It wasn't much, just a sliver of color in a gray world, but I held on to it like a promise. The next morning, my parents didn't come. Or the day after. On the third day, I received a text from my father's assistant, not even from him directly, saying they'd gone to their vacation home in Palm Springs to regroup. The message included the address of a storage facility where they'd apparently put the few possessions they'd deemed worth keeping. The code to access it was my birth year. At least they'd remembered that much. Dr. Williams came by with news about my transfer to the rehabilitation center. "Your social worker has been persistent," he said with a hint of admiration. "The paperwork's been expedited. You'll move tomorrow." "Thank you," I said. "And the prognosis. Is it still the same?" He sat at the edge of my bed, something doctors rarely did. Incomplete spinal cord injuries are unpredictable, Emma. Some patients regain significant function, others less so. But you're young, you were healthy before. The accident and the injury is lower on the spine. Those are all good factors. I can't promise you'll dance again, but I wouldn't rule out walking, even if it's with assistance. I nodded, trying to absorb this. My parents think I'll never walk again. Dr. Williams's expression hardened slightly. Your parents aren't medical professionals, and frankly, their assessment seems colored by considerations that have nothing to do with your recovery. It was the closest he'd come to criticizing them, and I appreciated his honesty. I won't give up, I said. Good. He patted my hand. That determination will matter more than anything I can do for you. The rehabilitation center was nicer than I expected. The building was modern, with wide windows that looked out on a small courtyard garden. My room was private, smaller than the hospital, but with touches that made it feel less institutional. A patterned curtain, a bulletin board for photos I didn't have, a small bookshelf. Marcus met me the first morning, now dressed in the center's uniform, navy pants and a polo with the center's logo. Welcome to your temporary home, he said. I've got your schedule. Hope you're ready to work. I was. For the next 2 weeks, I pushed myself through every therapy session, every painful attempt to move limbs that didn't fully cooperate. I learned to use a transfer board to move from bed to wheelchair. I built upper body strength I never knew I'd need. I cried in private. When the frustration became too much, then dried my tears and tried again. Marcus checked in daily, sometimes bringing me books or magazines. Once a laptop he said was donated, though I suspected it might have been his own. We talked during breaks, and I learned he'd been an army medic before becoming a social worker, that he'd seen what trauma could do to bodies and minds, and that he believed in small victories. Focus on today's win, he'd say when I'd get discouraged. Just today's. Tomorrow will have its own. On my third Saturday at the center, I was sitting in the courtyard enjoying rare Portland sunshine when I saw her. A woman about my age in a wheelchair, moving with grace and confidence I couldn't imagine possessing. She was demonstrating something to a younger patient, her hands moving in elegant, precise motions. That's Ellie Ramirez, Marcus said, appearing beside me with 2 cups of decent coffee. One of our physical therapists. She's in a wheelchair, I said, immediately feeling stupid for pointing out the obvious. Marcus smiled. Spinal cord injury? T10 level. Car accident 8 years ago. She went back to school after her recovery, got her PT license. She's one of the best we have. I watched her laugh at something the young patient said, the way she moved without hesitation or apology. Could I work with her? I thought you might ask that. She's got a full caseload, but I mentioned you to her. She's willing to see you for evaluation on Monday. The gratitude I felt was overwhelming. Thank you for everything, Marcus. I don't know why you're doing all this, but I'm doing my job, he said, but his smile suggested there was more to it. And maybe I recognize something in you. Resilience. Determination. The refusal to be defined by other people's limitations. Ellie wasn't what I expected. Her assessment was brutal in its honesty. You've got decent upper body control, poor core stability, and your right leg shows more response than your left. The good news is there's definitely potential. The bad news is it's going to hurt like hell, and I don't do pity breaks. I don't want pity, I said. She studied me for a long moment. No, I don't think you do. All right, Emma Reeves. Let's see what you're made of. The next 4 weeks were the hardest of my life. Ellie pushed me beyond what I thought possible, celebrating tiny improvements like major victories, refusing to let me give up even when pain and frustration left me in tears. On the worst days, when I couldn't see the point, she would position her chair directly in front of mine, eye to eye. "You get to decide what this injury takes from you," she'd say. "Not your doctors, not your parents, not even me. You. So what's it going to be?" Gradually, I began to see progress. My right leg responded more consistently. I could maintain sitting balance without support for longer periods. I learned to navigate the center in my wheelchair, then with a walker for short distances. My parents never called, never visited. But I found I thought about them less and less. My world had narrowed to immediate challenges and small triumphs, standing for 30 seconds, taking 3 steps with the parallel bars, dressing myself without assistance. Marcus continued to check in, bringing news about the insurance dispute. "They're still fighting it," he told me one evening as we sat in the common room. "But my contact at the commission is pushing back hard. There's a provision about traveling between work sites that clearly applies in your case." "What happens? If they never pay?" I asked. "Then we keep going with Medicaid. It's not ideal, but it's something. And there are other options: disability benefits, vocational rehabilitation programs." I nodded, trying not to let despair creep back in. The transitional housing would only last for 3 months. After that, I'd need a place to live, a way to support myself, a new life built from scratch. "One day at a time, remember?" Marcus said gently. "One day at a time," I repeated, wishing I believed it. The next morning, Ellie was waiting for me in the therapy room with something I hadn't seen before: forearm crutches. "Think you're ready to try these?" she asked, her eyes challenging me. I swallowed hard. "You think I am?" "I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't. Your right leg is doing more than holding its weight now, and the left is starting to catch up." We spent the hour with me learning to balance, to swing through, to trust the crutches and my own strengthening body. By the end, I'd managed to cross the room and back, sweating and trembling with effort but upright. More upright than I'd been in months. "Not bad, Reeves," Ellie said, and from her, this was high praise. I was still glowing from this achievement when I returned to my room and found Marcus waiting, his expression a mix of excitement and caution. "What is it?" I asked, transferring from wheelchair to bed with a skill that had become almost routine. "The insurance company called," he said. "They've reversed their decision. The claim is approved." I stared at him. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means they're covering all your medical expenses from the accident forward. And," he paused, "there's a settlement for future medical care, lost wages, pain and suffering." My heart was racing. "How much?" $680,000. The room seemed to spin. That's not possible." Marcus grinned. "Very possible. The driver who hit you was texting, running a red light, and had multiple prior citations. The company is cutting their losses before this goes to court." I pressed my hands to my mouth, tears springing to my eyes. Not just relief about money, though that was overwhelming, but the validation. The acknowledgement that what happened to me mattered, that my suffering had value, that my future deserved consideration. "There's a check," Marcus continued, "and some paperwork for you to sign. The funds will be deposited directly to an account in your name. And Emma? This means you have options now, real options." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a different kind of counting than I'd done in the hospital. I calculated what the money meant: housing I could afford, a vehicle I could operate, ongoing therapy not limited by insurance maximums. Perhaps even returning to school for something new. Something I chose for myself rather than to please my parents. My parents. The thought of them hit differently now. Not with the sting of abandonment, but with a strange, sad clarity. They had measured my worth in dollars and convenience, and found me wanting. Now, by that same measure, I was valuable again. But, to myself, on my terms. The next morning I asked Marcus for a favor. "Could you help me make a call? To my parents?" He looked surprised but nodded. Are you sure? I'm sure. My father answered on the fourth ring. Charles Reeves speaking. Dad, it's Emma. A pause. Emma. How are you? No apology. No acknowledgement of their absence. Just polite distance, as if I'd been away on business. I'm actually doing much better, I said, keeping my voice steady. I wanted to let you and Mom know that the insurance claim was approved. All of it. Another pause, longer this time. That's unexpected good news. The lawyer was certain. The settlement is substantial, I continued. $680,000. I heard him inhale sharply. Well, that's excellent. That will certainly help with your situation. Your mother and I were just talking about coming to visit soon. We've been so worried. The lie hung between us like a physical thing. Marcus, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand in silent support. There's no need, I said. I've made other arrangements, but I would like to pick up my remaining possessions from the storage unit. Of course. And Emma, we should talk about your recovery plan. Your mother and I have been researching some excellent facilities. Dad, I cut him off gently. I don't need your help. Not anymore. Don't be hasty, he said, his voice taking on that familiar tone of authority. Money like that can disappear quickly if it's not properly managed. I can help you set up a trust, make sure it lasts. Goodbye, Dad, I said. I'll have someone else collect my things. I ended the call before he could respond. Marcus looked at me, concern in his eyes. You okay? I nodded, surprised to find it was true. I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am. 2. Days later, my phone, a new one with a new number, rang with an unfamiliar caller ID. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Emma, it's your mother. Her voice was tight, controlled as always, but with an undercurrent I hadn't heard before. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. Hello, Mom. Your father told me about your windfall. We're very relieved for you. I said nothing, waiting. We'd like to come see you, she continued, to talk about next steps. Perhaps you could come home while you continue your recovery. Your old room is still there and we could make modifications? My old room, I repeated. In the house where you haven't invited me for 3 months. Where you decided I wasn't worth the investment? You're being dramatic, she said, but without her usual conviction. We were in shock. We needed time to process. So did I, Mom. I woke up in a hospital not knowing if I'd ever walk again. And you and Dad were worried about your retirement accounts. That's not fair. No, it wasn't fair, I agreed. None of this has been fair. But I'm not calling to place blame. I'm calling to let you know that I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. Without your help. There was a long silence. Because you have money now, she finally said, her voice bitter. No, I said. Because I found people who valued me when I had nothing. Because I learned I'm stronger than I thought. The money helps. But it's not why I'm okay. So that's it? After everything we've done for you? I closed my eyes. Pictured her standing, in her perfect kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, free hand gripping the marble countertop. What have you done for me, Mom? Since the accident? She didn't answer. I'll always be your daughter, I said softly. That doesn't change. But I'm not coming home. I'm building my own home now. With that settlement money. With or without it, I said. Goodbye, Mom. I ended the call, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and peace. Outside my window, Portland's rain had returned, gentle this time, washing the courtyard clean. I watched it for a while, then reached for my forearm. Crutches. Ellie was waiting. We had work to do. Marcus helped me find an apartment in a building with elevator access and wide doorways. It was small but bright, with a view of the river and space for a desk where I could eventually work. The first night there, sitting on my new couch, chosen for height and firmness. I looked around at the empty shelves waiting to be filled, the blank walls ready for whatever I chose to hang on them. "It's perfect," I told Ellie and Marcus, who had helped with the move. "Better than perfect. It's mine." Ellie raised her water glass. "To new beginnings." "And to unexpected heroes," I added, looking at them both. Marcus shook his head. "The hero here is you, Emma. We just witnessed it." After they left, I moved carefully to the window using my crutches. 3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here, looking out at city lights, planning a future entirely my own. 3 months ago, I'd been a daughter trying desperately to be what others wanted. Now, I was just Emma, broken in places, healing in others, but finally, entirely myself. The insurance money sat in an account, not a solution, but a tool. I'd use it carefully, for continued therapy, for education, for creating a life stable enough that I'd never have to beg for help from people who saw me as a burden. My phone buzzed with a text. My father. The lawyers reviewed the settlement. "You're entitled to more. Let me help you fight for it." I didn't respond. Some currencies weren't worth the exchange rate. Instead, I opened a new message to Ellie. "Thinking of looking into PT assistant programs. Crazy?" Her response came quickly. "Not crazy. Perfect. Let's talk tomorrow." I set the phone down and watched the night deepen over Portland. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and full of possibility. I didn't know what recovery would ultimately look like for me, how far I'd progress, what limitations would remain permanent. But I knew I wouldn't face it alone, and I wouldn't measure my worth by someone else's yardstick ever again. That night, I slept without counting ceiling tiles, without listening for footsteps that wouldn't come. In the morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through curtains I'd chosen myself, and took the first steps of a day that belonged entirely to me. My first day of physical therapy started like a slow-motion nightmare. The rehabilitation centers, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making the institutional green walls look even more sickly. I sat in the hospital-issued wheelchair, hands gripping the armrests so tightly my knuckles turned white, watching other patients move through their exercises with a familiarity I envied. Some worked with determination etched on their faces. Others moved mechanically, as if their bodies were borrowed things they couldn't quite control. "Emma Reeves?" A voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked up to see a man in his early 30s, with a tablet in hand. He wore the center's standard uniform, navy polo shirt and khaki pants, but something about the way he carried himself suggested military background. Precision in movement, economy of gesture. "That's me," I said, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I'm Daniel Knox, one of the physical therapists here. I'll be working with you today." He crouched down to eye level instead of looming over me. It was a small courtesy that immediately set him apart from most of the medical professionals I'd encountered since the accident. "Let's start by talking about where you are and where you want to go." I swallowed hard. "Honestly, I have no idea where I'm going. 3 weeks ago, I was showing luxury condos in the Pearl District. Now I gestured vaguely at the wheelchair. Daniel nodded, no pity in his expression, just calm assessment. "That's a normal response. But physically, let's establish a baseline. What can you feel? What can you move?" The clinical discussion that followed was both devastating and strangely comforting. The clarity of knowing exactly what worked and what didn't provided a structure to hang my shattered expectations on. Incomplete spinal cord injury at L1, some function in my right leg, minimal in my left, good upper body control. "The incomplete nature of your injury means there's significant potential for improvement," Daniel explained, making notes on his tablet. Recovery isn't linear. You'll have plateaus, setbacks, surprising leaps forward. Our job is to maximize what's possible. And what is possible? The question I'd been afraid to ask any of the doctors. He looked me directly in the eyes. I can't promise you'll walk unassisted again. Anyone who does is selling something. But movement, independence, a life worth living, all absolutely possible. I felt tears threatening and blinked them away. My parents seem to think I'll be in this chair forever, that I'm finished. Something flashed across Daniel's face, anger perhaps quickly controlled. With all due respect to your parents, they're not experts in spinal cord injury, and finished isn't a medical prognosis I recognize. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt a flicker of something dangerously close to hope. The session that followed was brutal. Daniel helped me onto a padded table, where he tested each muscle group methodically, pressing, prodding, asking me to push against resistance I could barely feel. My legs, once strong from years of walking properties in heels, felt like distant, appendages loosely tethered to my consciousness. I could will movement in my right foot, flex the ankle slightly, but my left remained stubbornly unresponsive. Good, Daniel said, after I managed to bend my right knee a few inches. Good? I let out a harsh laugh. That pathetic movement is good? Movement is movement, he replied simply. And yes, that's good. We'll build from here. By the end of the session, sweat had soaked through my t-shirt, and my arms trembled from the effort of supporting my weight during transfer exercises. Daniel helped me back into the wheelchair with efficient movements, neither coddling nor rushed. Same time tomorrow, he said, handing me a small towel. Ice your shoulders tonight. The soreness is normal. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. As he turned to leave, I found my voice. Daniel? Thank you. For not treating me like I'm made of glass. He paused. Glass breaks. You won't. I rolled myself back to my room, each push of the wheels sending spikes of pain through my overworked shoulders. The hallway seemed endless, the smooth linoleum floor stretching into a vanishing point that receded with each labored movement. When I finally reached my room, I nearly collapsed trying to transfer from the chair to the bed, barely managing to catch myself before I slid to the floor. This was my new reality. Every simple task now a complex negotiation between will and capability. I lay back on the thin mattress, staring at the textured ceiling tiles, and allowed myself 5 minutes of pure, indulgent self-pity. 5 minutes. To mourn the woman who had walked into work 3 weeks ago, confident in her designer suit, never imagining that by evening she'd be on an operating table with surgeons inserting metal rods alongside her damaged spine. When the 5 minutes were up, I reached for my phone to check messages. Nothing from my parents, of course. Nothing from the few friends I'd had. Mostly work colleagues who'd sent flowers to the hospital but gradually stopped reaching out when it became clear my recovery wouldn't be quick or neat. There was just one text, from an unknown number. This is Marcus Delaney, your social worker. Got you scheduled with housing coordinator tomorrow at 10 a.m. Also, found this, thought it might. Help with the hours between therapy sessions. Attached was a link to a free online course about real estate law updates. Exactly the kind of thing I would have been studying before the accident to stay ahead in my career. The gesture was so unexpected, so specifically thoughtful, that I felt tears spring to my eyes again. I tapped out a reply. Thank you. Truly. His response came immediately. Small things add up. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. In the context of my shattered life, no home, no career, no family support, they should have seemed trite, even insulting. But something about them resonated. Small things. The bend of a knee that yesterday wouldn't move. The kindness of a text message. The promise of tomorrow's appointment. A step toward whatever came next. I opened the course link and began to Red. Not because I believed I'd ever show luxury condos again, but because for the first time since the accident, I could imagine wanting something beyond mere survival. The housing coordinator, a brisk woman named Valerie with salt and pepper hair and practical shoes, didn't waste time on sympathy. "Your situation is complicated, but not unique," she said, reviewing my file. "No family support, insurance in dispute, limited financial resources. The good news is that qualifies you for transitional housing at River Point Apartments. They have accessible units specifically for patients in recovery." "For how long?" I asked. 3 months guaranteed, potentially extendable to 6, depending on your progress and circumstances." She looked up from her computer. "It's not permanent, Ms. Reeves. The goal is to get you stable enough to find your own housing." "On what income?" The question wasn't accusatory, just practical. "I can't exactly go back to showing real estate." "That's where vocational rehabilitation comes in." She handed me a brochure. "The state program can help with job retraining, education, adaptive equipment. In the meantime, we'll get you signed up for disability benefits." I stared at the brochure's cover, which showed a smiling woman in a wheelchair working at a computer. The forced optimism of the image made my stomach turn. So that's my future? Disability checks and a job where I won't be an inconvenience? Valerie's expression softened slightly. "Your future is what you make it, Ms. Reeves. The resources are tools, not destinies." I left her office with a folder full of paperwork and a hollow feeling in my chest. The reality of starting over at 29 with nothing, no savings, no support system, no clear path forward, was overwhelming. I'd always been the planner, the one who mapped out her life in careful 5-year increments. Now I couldn't see 5 days ahead with any clarity. Marcus found me in the center's small courtyard, staring at nothing in particular. He sat beside me without speaking, respecting the silence until I was ready to break it. 3 months, I finally said. "That's how long I have to figure out everything." He nodded. "It's not much time." His honesty was refreshing. No empty reassurances, no toxic positivity. "What happens if I can't?" I asked. "If 3 months isn't enough?" "Then we figure it out. Extensions, alternatives, appeals. There are options, Emma." "Are there?" Because from where I'm sitting, literally, the options look pretty limited. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Can I tell you something? Before I was a social worker, I was a medic in Afghanistan. I saw guys with injuries like yours, worse even, come back and build lives they never imagined. Different lives, sure, but meaningful ones." "It's not the same," I said. "They had the military, benefits, purpose. I have real estate licenses that require me to physically tour properties." "True. But you also have a brain that knows that industry inside and out. Knowledge that doesn't disappear because your legs don't work the same way." He paused. "And you have people in your corner now. People I've known for all of 2 days. Sometimes 2 days is enough to know who's worth fighting for." The simple conviction in his voice caught me off guard. In my former life, relationships had been carefully calibrated exchanges, clients, colleagues, my parents' social connections. The idea that this near stranger had decided I was worth fighting for, based on nothing but a few conversations, was both unsettling and oddly comforting. "I should call my parents," I said, changing the subject. "They should know about the housing arrangement." Marcus's expression remained neutral. "If you think that would help." "You don't think it would." "I think they've made their position clear," he said carefully. "And I think every bit of emotional energy you have right now is precious. Spend it where it will do the most good." He was right, of course. My parents had made their decision, calculated my worth against the inconvenience of my care, and found me wanting. Calling them would only invite more judgment, more subtle reminders of ways I'd failed to meet their standards. even before the eye. Accident. What about my things? I asked instead. They cleaned out my apartment while I was in surgery. I don't even have clothes except what the hospital provided. That, Marcus said, we can actually do something about. There's a community closet for patients in transition. Not haute couture, but practical stuff to get you started. And I can help you file a formal request for your personal property. You think they'll just hand everything over if I ask nicely? No, he admitted. But having the request documented matters if it comes to legal action later. And in the meantime, we work with what we have. What I had turned out to be a few sets of donated sweatpants, t-shirts, and hoodies, all in muted colors that wouldn't show stains or wear. Practical, as promised. The volunteer who helped me select them was kind, pretending not to notice when I held a soft gray hoodie to my face for a moment too long, overwhelmed by the simple comfort of something that wasn't a hospital gown. The socks are new, she said, gently, handing me several pairs still in packaging. And there's a toiletry kit with the basics. Shampoo, conditioner, that sort of thing. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. In 3 weeks, I'd gone from a woman with a closet full of tailored clothes and an apartment in a doorman building to someone grateful for donated socks. The indignity of it burned, not because of pride, but because of how quickly it had all slipped away. The life I'd built, the independence I'd earned. Thank you, I managed. This helps a lot. Back in my room, I laid out my new possessions on the bed. 3 sets of clothes, the toiletry kit, a used paperback someone had tucked. In with the socks, a mystery novel I'd never heard of. It looked like the inventory of a life being packed for evacuation, bare essentials only. My phone buzzed. My mother. After nearly a week of silence, her name on the screen felt like an intrusion. I almost didn't answer, but some residual daughterly obligation made me press the green button. Emma? Her voice was the same controlled, pleasant tone she used with difficult clients. How are you? I'm in rehab, I said flatly. How do you think I am? She sighed, the sound crisp with disappointment. There's no need for that attitude. Your father and I are trying to be supportive within our means. By emptying my apartment and disconnecting my phone, we couldn't keep paying rent on a place you weren't using, she said, as if explaining something to a child. And we've been under considerable stress. The audacity of it struck me speechless for a moment. They'd been under stress? Why? Are you calling, Mom? A pause. We're sorting through some of your things. I wanted to know what you'd like us to keep. It was the opening I needed. All of it. I'd like all of it back, actually, as soon as possible. That's not practical, Emma. We don't have unlimited storage space, and frankly, much of it won't be suitable for your new circumstances. My circumstances, I repeated. You mean the fact that I can't walk normally? There's no need to be dramatic. I'm simply pointing out that those pencil skirts and heels won't be of much use to you now. Each word was a precise cut, surgical, in its cruelty. Not because she was trying to be cruel, but because she genuinely couldn't see beyond the practical calculation. Broken daughter equals useless clothes. I'd like my documents, I said, voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. Birth certificate, passport, degrees, financial records, photos, anything of sentimental value. Of course, she replied smoothly. We've already set those aside. Your father can drop them at the rehabilitation center next week. And my clothes? My furniture? My books? Another sigh. Emma, be reasonable. You don't have anywhere to put furniture. And as I said, most of those clothes are mine. I cut in. Whether I can wear them tomorrow or not, they're mine. Things you took without my permission while I was in surgery. We were trying to help, she said, voice cooling. If you're going to be ungrateful, grateful? The word came out as a harsh laugh. For what exactly? Abandoning me when I needed you most? deciding I wasn't worth the inconvenience. Tell me what part of that deserves gratitude. Silence stretched between us, taut and brittle. When she spoke again, her tone was clipped. We'll have your father bring your important documents next week. The rest we'll have to discuss when you're feeling more rational. The call ended before I could respond. I sat still for a long moment, phone clutched in my hand, breathing through the familiar suffocation of being Diana Reeves's daughter, always falling short, always needing to be more rational, more practical, more like her. I texted Marcus, "Need legal advice, parents won't return my property." His response was immediate, on it. "And Emma, this isn't your fault." Those 5 words, "this isn't your fault," broke something loose inside me. A lifetime of believing that if I just tried harder, did better, became more, my parents would finally see me as enough. Now here was this virtual stranger telling me what no one in my family ever had, that I wasn't the problem. I looked at the small pile of donated clothes on my bed. Mine now, by necessity rather than choice. A visible reminder of everything I'd lost. But also, possibly, the first page of whatever came next. The next morning's therapy session introduced me to Elena, an occupational therapist with a no-nonsense manner and surprisingly gentle hands. "PT works on your body's capabilities," she explained as she assessed my range of motion. "I work on your daily functions. Dressing, bathing, cooking, all the stuff that makes independent living possible." "Bold of you to assume I could cook, even before the accident," I said, attempting humor. Elena's smile was quick. "Takeout counts as a life skill too. We just need to make sure you can open the containers." The session was less physically demanding than PT, but somehow more emotionally taxing. There was something uniquely humbling about learning to button a shirt with fingers that didn't always cooperate, about practicing transfers from wheelchair to toilet under a stranger's watchful eye. Each activity highlighted the gulf between who I had been and who I was now, a woman relearning the most basic elements of adult independence. "Frustration is normal," Elena said when I fumbled a simple task for the 3rd time. "Expected even. But it's not permanent. Your brain is rewiring itself, creating new pathways. It gets easier." "When?" I asked, hating the pleading note in my voice. "Sooner than you think in some ways, longer than you'd like in others. But it happens." After the session, exhausted and humbled, I wheeled myself back to my room to find a woman waiting outside my door. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, dressed in slacks and a cardigan that suggested comfortable authority. "Emma Reeves?" she asked. "I'm Patricia Winters from Legal Aid. Marcus Delaney referred your case to me." I blinked in surprise. That was fast. "Marcus mentioned it was time-sensitive. May I come in?" Inside my small room, Patricia sat in the visitor's chair and took out a notebook. "Tell me about your property situation." I explained everything. The apartment cleared out while I was in surgery, the phone disconnected, my parents' refusal to return most of my belongings. "They claim it's for practical reasons," I finished. "That I don't need those things anymore." Patricia's expression didn't change, but I noticed her grip on her pen tighten slightly. "Did you give them permission, verbal or written, to terminate your lease or remove your belongings?" "No, I was unconscious." "Did you have a power of attorney document naming them as your representatives?" I shook my head. "Nothing like that." "Then what they did was legally problematic at best, potentially criminal at worst." She made several notes. "Do you know where your belongings are now?" "Some in storage, apparently. Some disposed of or donated. I don't have details." Patricia looked up. "And they've explicitly refused to return everything?" "My mother said bringing my clothes and furniture wouldn't be practical, given my new circumstances." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "I see." Her tone was measured, Professional. Here's where we stand legally. Your parents had no right to terminate your lease, dispose of your property, or make decisions about your affairs. Without your consent or legal authority, we have grounds for action. What kind of action? A formal demand letter first, outlining what property needs to be returned and by when. If they don't comply, we can file for conversion, essentially, arguing they've unlawfully taken possession of your property. The legal terminology felt distant, abstract compared to the raw emotion of the situation. My mother deciding which pieces of my life were worth preserving. My father carrying boxes of my existence to unknown destinations. Would it work? I asked. Patricia's smile was small but determined. In my experience, people like your parents respond to formal legal pressure. They care about appearances, about doing things properly. A letter on legal aid stationery often accomplishes what personal requests can't. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt a flicker of control returning. Not over my body, that would be a longer battle, but over the boundaries of my life. The possibility that I could reclaim something, even if it was just clothes I might never wear again, felt like finding solid ground after weeks of freefall. What do you need from me? I asked. A detailed inventory of what you had, as specific as possible. Photos if you have access to any. Social media, cloud storage, anything that shows your belongings. And your signature on some forms authorizing me to represent you. I nodded, a sense of purpose spreading through me. This was something I could do. Make lists, remember details, fight back in concrete ways. One more thing, Patricia added. Do you have a bank account your parents can't access? If not, we should set one up immediately. Benefits, settlements, any financial assistance needs to go somewhere they can't control. The question brought me up short. I'd had a joint account with my mother since college, a practical arrangement that had never seemed problematic until now. No, I admitted. I need a new account. Patricia nodded, unsurprised. Marcus can help with that tomorrow. In the meantime, start on that inventory. Be thorough. It's not just about the objects. It's about establishing that you are still in charge of your life, regardless of your physical condition. After she left, I opened my laptop, the one Marcus had somehow produced, and began typing. Each item I listed was a thread connecting me to the woman I'd been before. The leather portfolio I'd received when I made my first major sale, the collection of architectural photography books I'd gathered over years, the blue cashmere sweater I'd saved 3 paychecks to buy. Some might never be useful to me again in the ways they once were, but they were mine. My choices, my history, my identity beyond patient or paraplegic or burden. The list grew to pages, memories spooling out in mundane details, the exact shade of my bedside lamps, the pattern of my favorite teacups, the titles of books arranged alphabetically on custom shelves. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. My shoulders ached from hunching over the laptop, and my eyes burned with exhaustion. But the document represented something vital, proof that Emma Reeves still existed beyond the confines of this rehabilitation center, beyond the limitations of her damaged body, a woman with taste and history and possessions worth fighting for. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and lay back on the narrow bed. Outside, Portland's perpetual rain tapped gently against the window, a rhythm that had once irritated me but now felt oddly comforting, a consistent presence in a world where everything else had become uncertain. Tomorrow would bring more therapy, more struggle, more small steps toward whatever life awaited me. But tonight, I'd reclaimed something essential. Not through physical progress or medical intervention, but through the simple act of remembering who I was and declaring that she mattered, broken spine and all. The day my life began to shift didn't announce itself with fanfare. No dramatic weather, no cosmic signs, just Portland's typical gray drizzle and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights in the rehabilitation center's dining hall. I was struggling. With the packaged silverware, fingers still clumsy after my morning therapy session when I heard someone approaching. Need a hand? The voice belonged to a woman in a wheelchair, late 30s maybe, with a sleek bob of copper hair and arms corded with lean muscle. She wore a staff polo but moved with the confidence of someone who lived in her body rather than just worked in the building. Thanks, I said, slightly embarrassed as she deftly tore open the plastic. I'm Ellie Ramirez, she said, positioning her chair across from me. I run the peer counseling program here. I nodded politely, expecting the usual well-meaning platitudes about positive attitudes and accepting my new normal. Instead, she reached for my pudding cup. You going to eat this? She asked. Before I could answer, she'd peeled back the lid and was digging in with my freshly liberated spoon. I guess not, I said, startled into a half laugh. Hospital food rule number 1. Always grab the pudding first. She took another bite. So, Emma Reeves, I hear you're giving Daniel a run for his money in PT. I frowned. Who told you that? Daniel did. Said you've got more fight than most patients he sees. She pointed the spoon at me. Also said you're a pain in the ass when you don't think you're making progress fast enough. He said that? Not in those exact words. He's more diplomatic. She finished the pudding and set the empty cup aside. But I recognize the type. You're used to setting a goal and powering through until you reach it. Now your body's not cooperating with your timeline, and it's making you crazy. The bluntness of her assessment was startling. Has anyone ever told you your bedside manner needs work? Ellie grinned. I'm not here for bedside manner. I'm here because I spent 6 months where you are now, convinced my life was over. She gestured to her wheelchair. T10 spinal cord injury. Car accident. 8 years ago. I looked at her more carefully, noticing the practiced efficiency of her movements, the way she'd positioned her chair at precisely the right angle to the table. And now you work here. Now I work here, live independently, travel, date occasionally, and generally have a life that doesn't revolve around what happened to my spine. She leaned forward slightly. Which is what I want to talk to you about. I didn't sign up for peer counseling, I said, defensive without quite knowing why. Nobody does. It's like those samples they hand out at grocery stores. You didn't go shopping for it, but you might find you like it. She pulled a tablet from her bag. Marcus mentioned you're struggling with the housing transition plan. The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. I wouldn't say struggling. I just don't see how 3 months in transitional housing solves anything when I have no job, no money, and parents who think I'm a financial liability. Ellie nodded, unsympathetic but not unkind. Fair assessment, so let's problem solve. What skills did you have before? I was in real estate. High-end residential, not exactly wheelchair-friendly. Because? Because I need to tour properties, stage homes, drive clients around. She tapped her chin thoughtfully. What about the behind-the-scenes stuff? Market analysis, contract review, client relationships? That's maybe 30% of the job, I said. So there's 30% you could still do. She made a note on her tablet. What about transitioning to a different role? Brokerage management, training, compliance? I pushed my untouched sandwich away. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Ellie's expression softened, slightly. Because 8 years ago, someone did it for me. Showed me that the life I lost wasn't the only one worth living. She closed her tablet. Look, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's possible. And sometimes you need someone who's been there to believe that before you can. She left me with her card and a recommendation for a vocational counselor who specialized in professionals with sudden disabilities. I stared at it for a long time after she'd gone, turning it between my fingers like some kind of talisman. That evening, I received an unexpected email. a name I hadn't seen in my inbox for weeks. Olivia Chen, my closest friend from the brokerage. The one who'd sent flowers to the hospital but then disappeared like everyone else. Emma, I've been thinking about you constantly. I should have reached out sooner, but honestly didn't know what to say. Robert mentioned you're in a rehabilitation facility now. How are you really? Can I visit? Liv. Robert. My father. Of course. The anger rose sudden and hot. I could picture the conversation perfectly. My father mentioning my situation, with just the right mix of concern and resignation, painting himself as the devoted parent dealing with difficult circumstances. I started and deleted 3 responses before settling on one. Thanks for reaching out. Still figuring things out day by day. Visitors are allowed Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 to 7 p.m. if you'd like to stop by. Emma. No accusations, no bitterness. On display. Just neutral facts. Let her make the effort if she really wanted to reconnect. I wasn't going to beg for friendship any more than I'd beg my parents for support they were unwilling to give. The next morning, I woke to an email notification from Patricia Winters. The subject line was simple. Demand letter sent. I opened it with fingers that trembled slightly, scanning the formal legal language addressed to my parents. It outlined exactly what property needed to be returned, by when, and the consequences if they failed to comply. Seeing my life itemized in legal terms, personal effects, financial documents, electronics, furnishings, was surreal. But there was power in the formality of it. Patricia had added a personal note. This usually gets results. If not, we move to the next step. Stay strong, Emma. An hour later, during my PT session, my phone rang. My father. I showed Daniel the screen. Take it if you need to, he said, pausing our exercises. I shook my head. It can wait. For the next 45 minutes, I channeled everything, the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, into the most focused therapy session I'd had yet. When Daniel commented on my improved form during a core stabilization exercise, I realized I was drawing strength from finally taking action, from refusing to be a passive recipient of whatever my parents decided I deserved. When the session ended, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls and a text from my father. We need to discuss this letter immediately. This is unnecessary and hurtful. Call me. I forwarded the message to Patricia with my own addition. How would you suggest I respond? Her reply came quickly. You don't need to respond at all. The letter contains all necessary information. If you do speak with him, refer any questions about the legal aspects to me. Stay focused on your recovery. That's your priority, right? Now? She was right, of course. My energy was limited, precious. Using it to manage my father's wounded pride was a poor investment. I put the phone away and headed to my occupational therapy appointment, letting the calls go to voicemail. By that evening, the calls had stopped. Instead, an email arrived from my father's personal assistant, Janet, the woman who had organized my life from childhood piano lessons to college application deadlines. Dear Emma, your father has asked me to coordinate the return of your personal items as outlined in the communication from Ms. Winters. Please confirm which of the following dates would be suitable for delivery to your current location. The email was coolly professional. No personal message, no inquiry about my well-being, just logistics. I felt a strange mix of victory and grief. I'd gotten what I wanted. My belongings would be returned. But the emotional distance in the message confirmed what I already knew. I was now a problem to be managed, not a daughter to be loved. I replied with a date and specific delivery instructions, copying Patricia. Then I wheeled myself to the small courtyard that served as the rehabilitation center's outdoor space. The evening air was cool, tinged with the scent of damp earth and approaching autumn. A few other patients sat scattered around the perimeter, an elderly man with an oxygen tank, a woman about my age with bandaged arms, a teenager scrolling through his phone with his non-casted hand. We were an unlikely collection, united only by broken bodies and disrupted lives. I wondered about their stories, the before and after narratives that had landed them here among the concrete planters and metal benches bolted to the ground. Did they have families who stood by them? Homes to return to? Futures they could envision with any clarity? Deep thoughts? Marcus appeared beside me, 2 paper cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to me. "Just wondering where everyone goes from here," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Including me." He sat on a nearby bench. "That's the question, isn't it? Not just how to heal, but how to build something new when the old blueprints don't work anymore." Poetic way of saying I'm screwed. That's not what I meant. He took a sip of his coffee. Every patient I work with faces that question. The ones who move forward aren't necessarily those with the least severe injuries or the most resources. They're the ones who find a way to rewrite their story without making their injury the main character. I considered this. But it is the main character right now. It dictates everything, where I live, what I can do, how people see me. For now, he acknowledged, but not forever, unless you let it. How do you know you're not the one in this chair? Marcus looked at me for a long moment. Then he set his coffee down and rolled up his left pant leg to reveal a prosthetic limb from the knee down. "Afghanistan," he said simply. "IED. I was 22. I stared, embarrassment heating my face. I didn't know. Most people don't. Not because I hide it, but because it's not the most interesting thing about me. He rolled the pant leg back down. It changed everything. And then, eventually, it didn't. I looked away, watching a sparrow hop along the edge of a planter. I'm sorry for assuming. Don't be. It's a natural reaction. He retrieved his coffee. My point is, right now the injury feels like your whole story, but it's just a chapter. A significant one, sure, but not the entire book. The conversation stayed with me through the evening and into the next day's therapy sessions. Not in a lightning bolt revelation sort of way, but as a quiet counterpoint to the frustration of failed attempts and slow progress. Each time I wanted to give up, I found myself thinking of Marcus rolling up his pant leg matter-of-factly, of Ellie stealing my pudding cup with practiced ease. They weren't defined by what had happened to them. Somehow they'd found a way to make it part of their story without surrendering to it entirely. Thursday arrived with unexpected sunshine and a text from Olivia. "Still okay to visit today? Can be there around 5:30. I confirmed, feeling a flutter of nervous anticipation. Olivia had been the closest thing I had to a real friend before the accident. The person I'd grab lunch with between showings, who'd help me rehearse client pitches, who knew how much I struggled with my parents' expectations. Seeing her would be the first real connection to my old life since everything had changed. I spent more time than usual getting ready, exchanging the standard rehab center sweatpants for the one pair of jeans I'd managed to acquire. Adaptive, with higher backs and strategic stretch panels, washing my hair properly, even applying minimal makeup. The effort felt both important and absurd, as if looking more like my former self could somehow bridge the gap between then and now. At 5:27, a soft knock on my door. Olivia stood there, looking exactly as she always had. Sleek, black. Bob, immaculate blazer, designer bag. For a moment, seeing her was like looking through a window to a parallel universe where my accident had never happened, and I was still that other Emma. Ambitious, able-bodied, always slightly anxious about meeting expectations. Emma. Her voice caught slightly. "It's so good to see you." She stepped forward for a hug, hesitating just enough to make it awkward. I extended my arms from the wheelchair, and we managed a strange half-embrace that felt like a metaphor for everything. That had changed. "Come in," I said, backing up to make room. "It's not much, but it's home for now." Olivia glanced around the small room, institutional beige walls, single bed, minimal furniture, and seemed unsure where to sit. I gestured to the room's only chair. "So," she said once seated, hands fidgeting slightly with the strap of her bag, "how are you doing?" The question hung in the air, loaded with everything she wasn't directly asking. "How bad is it? Will you walk again? Are you still you?" "I'm adapting," I said. "Lots of therapy, learning to navigate the world from this perspective." I gestured to the wheelchair. "It's not what I planned, but then neither was getting T-boned by a delivery truck." She winced. "I still can't believe it happened. 1 minute you were heading to that listing on Hawthorne, and then—" God, Emma, when I heard, I was devastated. "But not devastated enough to visit until now," I said, immediately regretting the sharpness in my tone. Olivia looked down. "I deserve that. I didn't know what to say, how to help. When your parents said you needed space to adjust, I thought—" "My parents said what?" I interrupted. She looked up, confusion crossing her face. "Your father called the office about 2 weeks after the accident. He said you were dealing with a lot of adjustment issues and needed to focus on recovery without distractions. That you'd reach out when you were ready." She paused. "That's not what happened, is it?" The familiar cold fury settled in my chest. Of course. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd actively isolated me, ensuring no one from my former life would interfere with their narrative. "No," I said quietly. "That's not what happened. My parents decided my care was too inconvenient, too expensive. They cleaned out my apartment while I was in surgery, canceled my phone, and essentially told me I was on my own." Olivia's eyes widened. "What? But that's horrible. Why would they do that?" "Because keeping up appearances matters more to them than their actual daughter." I was surprised by how steady my voice remained. They didn't want the burden of a child who might not fit neatly into their perfect life anymore. "Emma, I'm so sorry. If I'd known, you couldn't have." I softened my tone. "They've always been good at managing perceptions. It's what they do." A heavy silence fell between us. Olivia looked genuinely distressed, her usual composed demeanor cracking. "What can I do?" she finally asked. "How can I help now?" It was such a simple question, yet no one had asked it quite so directly before. Not what would happen to me, not what I could still manage, but what she could do to help. "Just this," I said. "Visiting, treating me like I'm still me, not just a sad story or a medical condition. Maybe bringing real coffee next time because the stuff here tastes like watered-down dirt." She laughed, relief evident in her face. "That I can definitely do. And Emma, the office isn't the same without you. Johnson still can't figure out how you organize the client files, and Richardson keeps asking when you're coming back." "I'm not," I said, the reality settling as I spoke the words. "At least, not to the same role. This changes things." I gestured to my wheelchair. "Maybe," she conceded. "But you know more about Portland real estate than most of the senior brokers. That knowledge doesn't disappear because you can't sprint through open houses in heels anymore." It was eerily similar to what Ellie had said, and hearing it from someone who knew my professional capabilities felt validating in a way I hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about that, actually," I admitted. "About what parts of the job I could still do. Maybe something in transaction coordination or compliance review." Olivia nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. You were always the one who caught contract issues before they became problems. And what about the market analysis reports you used to put together? Those were gold." For the next hour, we talked shop, real estate trends, difficult clients, office politics. It was the most normal I'd felt in weeks, discussing something I knew well, using the professional part of my brain that had been dormant since the accident. By the time Olivia left, promising to return the following week with proper coffee and industry gossip, I felt a subtle shift in my perspective. The injury had changed my body and derailed my career track. That was undeniable. But it hadn't erased my knowledge, my professional reputation, or my ability to contribute in meaningful ways. Perhaps there was a path forward that incorporated both my past expertise and my current reality. That night, I opened my laptop and began researching real estate roles that could be done remotely or with limited mobility, certifications that might enhance my value in non-traditional positions, brokerages with reputations for inclusive hiring practices. It wasn't a fully formed plan, but it was the first time since the accident that I'd looked at my professional future as something to be actively shaped rather than mourned. As I was making notes, an email notification appeared. Patricia Winters, with an unexpected update. Emma, I've just received a response from your parents' attorney. They've agreed to return all requested items this Saturday. However, they're requesting a meeting with you first, without legal representation. I strongly advise against this. Any communication should go through proper channels at this point. Please let me know how you'd like to proceed. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. A meeting. After weeks of near silence, after delegating my belongings to an assistant, they suddenly wanted face-to-face time. Not out of concern for my well-being, but because they'd been legally cornered. I thought about how they'd isolated me from friends, how they'd made decisions about my possessions. Without consultation, how they'd calculated my worth and found it insufficient. But I also thought about the small, stubborn part of me that still craved their approval, that still remembered birthdays when my father's rare pride had felt like sunshine, moments when my mother's perfectionism had softened into something almost like tenderness. The conflicting emotions formed a knot in my chest, anger and longing, resentment and hope. I knew what Patricia would advise. I knew what Marcus would say. But this was my decision, my family, my boundary to set or cross. I typed my response. I'll meet with them, but not alone. I want Marcus Delaney present, and I want it to happen here, on my territory. If they agree to those terms, we can proceed. The reply came within minutes, not from Patricia, but from my father directly. Emma, we accept your conditions. Saturday at 10 a.m. This situation has spiraled unnecessarily. Your mother and I want what's best for you. We always have. Dad. I stared at those last lines, the familiar mix of authority and paternalism. We want what's best for you. As if abandoning me had been some tough love strategy rather than cold calculation. As if they alone knew what was best for a grown woman whose life had been upended. For the first time since the accident, I felt something beyond anger or hurt when thinking about my parents. I felt clarity. Whatever happened on Saturday, I would no longer be defining myself through their eyes. The daughter, desperate for approval, had been left behind in that crushed car on Hawthorne Boulevard. The woman emerging from the wreckage, broken but rebuilding, had different standards now, different measures of worth. I closed my laptop and wheeled to the window. Outside, Portland's lights glimmered through a fine mist, the city continuing its rhythms indifferent to personal catastrophes. Somewhere out there was my future, altered, uncertain, but increasingly my own to shape. The thought was terrifying and strangely freeing, like standing at the edge of an unfamiliar wilderness. But for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I found myself curious to explore rather than simply survive it. Saturday morning arrived with a weight of anticipation that made my hands shake as I got dressed. I'd spent an hour the previous evening selecting my outfit from the limited options available to me, settling finally on a navy sweater Olivia had brought during her second visit, and the least institutional-looking pair of black pants from the Fuhrer donation closet. It wasn't my former wardrobe of tailored blazers and silk blouses, but it was the closest approximation of the put-together professional I'd once been. "You don't have to do this," Marcus reminded me as he helped arrange the room. We'd pushed the visitor's chair to create space for my parents while positioning my wheelchair, so I wouldn't be looking up at them. A small but important detail in the power dynamics of the coming conversation. "I know," I said, adjusting the sweater's neckline for the 4th time. "But I need to. For me." Marcus nodded, understanding without requiring further explanation. That was one of the things I'd come to appreciate most about him. He respected my decisions even when he might have made different ones. No lectures, no condescension, just quiet support. At precisely 9:57 a.m., a knock at the door. Marcus gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze before opening it to reveal my parents standing side by side like a portrait of upper-middle-class propriety. My mother in a camel cashmere coat that probably cost more than a month of my former rent. My father in a charcoal suit that managed to look both casual and expensive. Both wearing expressions of carefully cultivated concern. "Emma," my mother said, stepping forward. She leaned down as if to kiss my cheek, then seemed to reconsider, straightening up again awkwardly. "You look well." The hesitation said everything her words didn't. I looked different, thinner, paler, seated rather than standing. Not their vision of well at all. "Diana, Charles," Marcus greeted them with professional courtesy. "I'm Marcus Delaney, Emma's caseworker." "Yes, we gathered," my father said, eyeing him with the subtle wariness he reserved for service providers who might overcharge. He turned to me. "Emma, is this really necessary? Having someone present for a family conversation?" "It's not just a family conversation," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "It's a negotiation about my property that you removed without permission. And yes, it's necessary." My mother sighed, the sound familiar from countless childhood disagreements. Always. So dramatic. We were simply trying to help during a difficult time. "By emptying my apartment while I was in surgery?" The words came out sharper than intended. "By telling my friends I didn't want contact?" My father's expression tightened. "We did what we thought best given the circumstances. The lease was month to month, and the medical bills were mounting. It was the practical decision." "Practical for whom?" I asked. "Not for me. I woke up with nowhere to go, no clothes, no personal items, just discharge papers and parents who had decided I wasn't worth the investment." "That's not fair," my mother interjected. We were in shock. The doctors were talking about permanent disability, extensive care needs. We aren't equipped for that kind of situation. "Neither was I said quietly. "But it was happening. To me, not you." An uncomfortable silence fell. My father glanced at Marcus, clearly wishing he wasn't witnessing this family unraveling. "We've agreed to return your things," he finally said, his businessman's tone taking over. "Janet has organized everything according to the list your lawyer provided. The movers are waiting for instructions on where to deliver it all." "The transitional housing facility," Marcus supplied. "They have storage units for residents. I can provide the address and access information." My father nodded curtly. "Fine. But Emma, we need to discuss your financial situation. The medical bills are being handled," I cut in. "Medicaid for now, and the insurance claim is being reviewed. You don't need to worry about it affecting your retirement fund." The words landed with precision. My mother flinched slightly. "That was an unfortunate conversation," she said, voice tight. "We were upset, not thinking clearly." "You were being honest," I countered. "For perhaps the first time. You weighed my value against my cost and found me wanting." "That's not true," my father insisted, color rising in his face. "We were concerned about the quality of care we could provide. We wanted what was best for you." "What was best for me?" I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "So abandoning me at the hospital, taking my possessions and cutting off my support system, that was for my benefit." My mother's composure slipped further. "What do you want from us, Emma? An apology?" "Fine, we apologize. We handled it poorly. But you have no idea what it's like to get that call, to see your child hooked up to machines, to hear terms like permanent paralysis and lifetime care." Now we were frightened. "So was I said, my voice dropping to nearly a whisper. I was terrified and alone, because the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally decided there were conditions after all. The room fell silent again, heavier this time. My father looked away, studying the institutional beige wall as if it might offer some escape. My mother's perfectly manicured hands twisted in her lap, a rare display of genuine discomfort. "What happens now?" my father finally asked, looking not at me but at Marcus, as if he were the authority on his daughter's future. "That depends," Marcus replied evenly. "The return of Emma's property is step one. From there, it's about respecting her autonomy and supporting her choices, if she wants your support." The emphasis on the conditional was subtle but unmistakable, a boundary being drawn. "Of course we want to support you," my mother said quickly. "We're your parents. We can help financially now that we've had time to make arrangements." The calculation was visible on her face, a reassessment of investment potential now that the initial shock had passed. The realization struck me suddenly. They weren't here because they'd reconsidered their abandonment. They were here because legal action threatened their carefully maintained image, because explaining to their friends why their daughter was suing them would be more uncomfortable than writing a check. "I don't want your money," I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "I want you to understand what you did, not just to my living situation, but to me, to our relationship." "We made a mistake," my father conceded, finally looking at me directly. "We panicked. Surely you can understand that." "I understand panic," I said. "What I don't understand is leaving your daughter without resources, without support, without even her own clothes, and then acting like it was a reasonable choice." My mother's expression hardened slightly. "You've always been so black and white about things, Emma. So unwilling to see nuance." "There's nothing nuanced about abandonment," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "It's a yes or no choice. You chose no." "And now?" my father asked, an edge of impatience creeping in. "What do you want from us now?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for days. What did I want from these people who had proven their love was conditional? Who had measured my worth in convenience and cost? Part of me wanted to hurt them as they'd hurt me, to reject them completely. Another part, younger, more vulnerable, still craved their approval, their acceptance. "Time," I said finally. "Space. The chance to rebuild my life without worrying about meeting your expectations or fitting into your vision of what my recovery should look like." "You're cutting us off," my mother said, a note of disbelief in her voice. The irony of her statement hung in the air between us. Marcus shifted slightly beside me, a silent reminder of his presence and support. "I'm setting boundaries," I clarified. "My belongings will be returned. My legal and medical decisions are my own. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it will be on terms that respect my autonomy." "And if we don't agree to these terms?" my father asked, the businessman emerging again. "Then you'll be choosing to step back from my life," I said simply. Again. The bluntness seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at my mother, some unspoken communication passing between them. "We should discuss this privately," he said, rising from his chair. "This has been overwhelming." My mother stood as well, smoothing her expensive slacks with practiced precision. "Emma, We do love you. Whatever you might think right now, we didn't know how to handle this. It was the closest thing to vulnerability I'd heard from her in years. For a moment, I glimpsed the frightened woman beneath the polished exterior, someone confronting a situation she couldn't control, couldn't manage into submission with the right outfit or social connection. "I know," I said, softening slightly. "But love isn't just a feeling. It's what you do when things get hard." She nodded, eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. My father placed his hand on her back, guiding her toward the door. "We'll be in touch about the delivery arrangements," he said, more to Marcus than to me. Then, with a tight nod in my direction, "Take care of yourself, Emma." And they were gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of my mother's Chanel perfume and the echo of unsaid words. Marcus closed the door behind them and turned. To me, concern evident in his expression. "You okay?" I took a deep breath, surprised to find I wasn't on the verge of tears. "Yes, I think I am." That was intense. "It was necessary," I said, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. "For all of us." He sat in the chair my father had vacated. "What now?" "Now," I said, "we make sure they actually return my things, and then I focus on what comes next." The delivery arrived that afternoon. 3 movers with a truck full of carefully labeled boxes, furniture wrapped in moving blankets, garment bags containing clothes I wasn't sure would fit my changing body. Marcus had arranged for the items to be placed in a storage unit at the transitional housing facility where I'd be moving the following week. I supervised from my wheelchair, directing which boxes contained essentials I'd need immediately and which could be accessed later. It was strange seeing my former life reduced to containers and inventory lists. The sleek desk where I'd prepared client presentations, the bookshelf filled with architectural references and real estate guides, the framed diploma my parents had, insisted on displaying prominently even though I'd wanted something less conventional for my wall space. One of the movers approached with a small wooden box I immediately recognized, my grandmother's jewelry case. "Where do you want this, ma'am? It's marked fragile." "I'll take it," I said, reaching out. "This one stays with me." The box was heavier than I remembered, solid walnut with brass hinges that had oxidized to a gentle patina over decades. My grandmother had given it to me on my 16th birthday, filling it with pieces she'd collected throughout her life. Not particularly valuable in monetary terms, but rich with stories and memories. When the movers had gone, I opened it cautiously, half expecting to find it empty. Instead, everything was there. The amber pendant she'd bought in Poland as a young woman, the silver bangles that had jingled as she baked, the strand of freshwater pearls she'd worn to my high school graduation. Beneath them, tucked in the velvet lining, was a folded piece of paper I didn't recognize. I pulled it out carefully. My mother's handwriting, elegant and precise. "Emma, these were your grandmother's treasures, and now they are yours. Some legacies can't be measured in bank statements." "Mom." I stared at the note, uncertain what to make of it. A peace offering? A moment of genuine sentiment? Or another calculated gesture to maintain the appearance of maternal care? Whatever its intent, it was evidence of something I'd almost forgotten. That my mother was more than her worst moments, more than her failures during my crisis. She was also the daughter of a woman who had valued legacy and memory, who had passed down stories along with silver bangles. The realization didn't erase the hurt or excuse the abandonment, but it complicated the narrative I'd been constructing, the clean division between before and after, between those who had stayed and those who had left. That evening, I pulled my laptop from one of the unpacked boxes and began a task I'd been postponing, updating my professional profiles to reflect my new reality. LinkedIn, industry directories, the brokerage website where my smiling photo still appeared under our team, showing a woman in heels standing confidently beside a sold sign. I hesitated over the edits, uncertain how much to disclose. Would acknowledging my disability drive away potential opportunities? Would omitting it feel dishonest? After several drafts, I settled on directness without excessive detail. Emma Reeves brings over 7 years of Portland real estate expertise to her work as an independent consultant, specializing in market analysis, transaction coordination, and contract review. Following a significant injury in 2023, Emma now focuses on leveraging her comprehensive industry knowledge in remote and consulting capacities. It wasn't perfect, but it was true. I was no longer the agent in heels rushing between showings, but I wasn't defined solely by what I'd lost either. I had knowledge, expertise, a professional reputation that existed separately from my physical capabilities. After making the updates, I checked my email to find a message from Olivia with the subject line, "Opportunity?" She'd spoken to the brokerage owner about creating a new position, transaction coordinator with a focus on compliance review that could be done primarily remotely. "It's not charity," she wrote. "Johnson is drowning in paperwork since you left, and 3 deals nearly fell through last month because of contract issues no one caught. They need someone with your eye for detail. Think about it?" The timing felt significant. This door appearing just as I'd found the courage to close another. I didn't respond immediately, wanting to consider the offer carefully rather than jumping at the first opportunity out of desperation. But I felt a flutter of excitement that had nothing to do with gratitude for being wanted and everything to do with recognizing my own value. Later that night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through my phone and found myself looking at real estate listings. Not as a potential agent, but with new eyes. I noticed barriers I'd never registered before. Steps without ramps, narrow doorways, inaccessible bathrooms. The built environment that had once been merely the backdrop to my work now revealed itself as a landscape of obstacles and exclusions. On impulse, I opened a new document and began typing notes. Accessible real estate, market analysis and design considerations. Remote closing processes, maximizing efficiency while accommodating diverse needs. Reimagining property tours, virtual. Options for buyers with mobility challenges. The ideas flowed easily, drawing on my industry knowledge but filtered through my new perspective. By the time exhaustion finally pulled me toward sleep, I had outlines for 3 potential specialized reports. Work that could establish me as an expert in an underserved market niche that could transform my changed circumstances from liability to specialized insight. The next morning, I woke to a text from Marcus. Moving day arrangements confirmed for Thursday. River Point Apartments Unit 217. First floor accessibility as requested. River Point, the transitional housing facility that would be my home for at least the next 3 months while I continued outpatient therapy and built toward whatever came next. Not my sleek downtown apartment with its city views and doorman, but a place of my own nonetheless. A space where I could begin to reimagine a life that accommodated both my limitations and my possibilities. During that day's therapy session, I mentioned the potential job opportunity to Daniel. His response was characteristically direct. "Can you physically handle it? Computer work, I mean. Your core stability is improving, but prolonged sitting still challenges you. I'd need accommodations," I admitted. "Scheduled breaks, maybe an ergonomic assessment." He nodded approvingly. "Good. Recognizing the need for adaptation without letting it stop you. That's exactly the mindset that makes for successful recovery." "It feels strange," I confessed. "Planning a future when so much is still uncertain. I don't even know how much function I'll ultimately regain." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "No one ever knows exactly what's coming, Emma. Able-bodied. People just have the luxury of forgetting that fact." The observation stayed with me throughout the afternoon, through my occupational therapy session where I practiced transferring from wheelchair to car seat, through the meeting with the insurance caseworker who updated me on my pending claim. No one ever knows exactly what's coming. The accident had stripped me of the illusion of certainty, of control. But perhaps that illusion had always been just that, a comforting fiction rather than a reality. By Thursday morning, my few essential possessions were packed into 2 duffel bags and a plastic container. Marcus arrived early to help with the final paperwork and transportation arrangements. "Nervous?" he asked, noticing my quietness as we waited for the transport van. "Yes," I admitted, "but also ready. I've been institutionalized for almost 2 months now. Hospital, rehab center. The idea of having my own space again, even a temporary one. It's a big step," he agreed. "Independence always is." The River Point Apartments complex wasn't beautiful by conventional standards, a utilitarian 3-story building of beige brick and practical design. But as the van pulled into the parking lot, I found myself studying it with unexpected appreciation. The wide doorways, the gently sloped entrances instead of steps, the elevator prominently positioned in the lobby, all features I would have barely noticed before, but now recognized as thoughtful accommodations. Unit 217 was small, but functional. A studio with an open floor plan that allowed for wheelchair maneuverability, a bathroom with grab bars already installed, a kitchenette with lowered countertop sections. The furnishings were basic but new: a bed, a desk, a small dining table, a couch that looked like it could double as a guest bed if needed. "What do you think?" Marcus asked as I explored the space, testing clearances and reach distances. "It's perfect," I said, surprising myself with the genuine feeling behind the words. Not perfect by my old standards of luxury finishes and premium locations, but perfect for who I was now and what I needed: a place to heal, to work, to rebuild. Marcus helped me unpack the essentials and arrange the furniture for optimal accessibility. We hung a few photographs I'd salvaged from my parents' delivery: my college graduation, a hiking trip to Mount Hood before the accident, a beach sunset from a vacation that seemed to belong to another lifetime. Small anchors to my past self while I figured out who I was becoming. "Will you be okay here?" he asked as he prepared to leave. "The building has 24-hour security and staff checks, but it's your first night alone since everything changed. Since I woke up in a hospital bed with metal rods in my spine and parents who couldn't quite meet my eyes." "I'll be fine," I said, more confidently than I felt. "I need this, to prove I can do it." He nodded, understanding. "I'm a phone. Call away if you need anything, and your first outpatient therapy appointment is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Transportation will pick you up at 9:30. After he left, I sat by the window, watching the afternoon light change over the courtyard below. The space was quiet, in a way the rehabilitation center never was. No squeaking wheels, no medical equipment beeping, no voices in the hallway discussing treatment plans and progress notes. Just silence and the distant hum of traffic. I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief at having privacy again, anxiety about managing alone, pride at this concrete step toward independence, sadness for everything that had been lost in the journey here. The apartment wasn't a final destination, but a way station, a place to gather strength for whatever came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. "First night in new digs? Remember? Transitions are hard. Independence is worth it. Call if you're freaking out." "You probably will. Everyone does." Her bluntness made me smile. I texted back, "So far, so good. Ask me again at 3 a.m. As evening settled in, I made my first independent meal since the accident. Nothing ambitious, just a microwave dinner from the stock Marcus had helped me arrange in the kitchenette. The simple act of selecting food, preparing it, and eating at my own table without institutional scheduling felt like a small revolution. After dinner, I opened my laptop and found an email from Patricia Winters. "Emma, just checking in on moving day. Also wanted to update you on the insurance situation. The claims adjuster called this morning. They're still reviewing, but initial indicators are positive. Don't get your hopes up too high yet, but there's movement. Let me know if you need anything. Insurance claims. The bureaucratic maze that would determine much of my financial future. I'd been avoiding thinking too deeply about it, focusing instead on immediate challenges, therapy, housing, day-to-day function. But Patricia's update forced me to confront the bigger picture. If the claim was approved, it could mean substantial financial support, enough to cover ongoing medical expenses, possibly even compensation for lost income and future care needs. If denied, I'd be facing a much steeper climb toward stability. I closed the email without responding, not ready to attach hope to something so uncertain. Instead, I returned to the document I'd started earlier in the week, the outline for a market analysis of accessible real estate needs in Portland. The work felt grounding, a reminder that regardless of what external systems decided about my value and compensation, I still had skills that mattered, knowledge worth sharing. As night deepened outside my new windows, I prepared for bed with the careful routine I'd developed in rehabilitation, modified movements that accommodated my limited mobility, extra time for tasks that once would have been unconscious. The process was neither quick nor graceful, but it was mine, evidence of adaptation rather than defeat. Lying in the unfamiliar bed, I found myself thinking about the conversation with my parents days earlier. The hurt remained, a bruise that would take much longer to heal than my physical injuries. But beneath it, I recognized something important. I was no longer the daughter waiting for approval, measuring my worth through their eyes. Their abandonment, painful as it was, had forced me to find value and strength outside their validation. Whatever came next, whether the insurance claim provided financial security or left me building from scratch, whether my parents eventually found their way back into my life or remained at its margins, I would face it on my own terms. Not as the perfect daughter I'd once tried to be, but as the woman I was becoming. Scarred, resilient, increasingly my own. I fell asleep listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new building, the occasional footsteps in the hallway, the distant hum of the elevator. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was mine now, to reshape however I could. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after I'd moved into River Point Apartments. I was at my desk, now properly set up as a workstation with an ergonomic chair Marcus had helped source, reviewing a contract for Olivia's brokerage. The part-time consulting work wasn't lucrative, but it kept my skills sharp and provided structure. Today's otherwise dominated by therapy appointments and recovery milestones. When my phone chimed with the notification, I almost ignored it, focused on finding an inconsistency in the property description that could cause problems at closing. But something, intuition perhaps, made me glance at the screen. Patricia, Winters, subject line. Urgent, insurance decision. My heart rate spiked instantly. I set aside the contract and opened the email with fingers that suddenly felt clumsy with anticipation. Emma, call me as soon as possible. Insurance company. Has reached a decision. Good news. Patricia. Good news. 2 simple words that contained worlds of possibility. I fumbled with the phone, Patricia's number already saved in my contacts from our previous communications. She answered on the second ring. Emma, glad you called right away. What happened? I asked, skipping pleasantries. The claim has been approved, she said, her typically measured voice allowing a note of satisfaction. All medical expenses past and future related to the accident, plus compensation for lost income, pain and suffering, and necessary accommodations. I gripped the edge of my desk. How much? A pause. The total settlement is $680,000. The number struck me like a physical force. $680,000. More money than I'd ever imagined controlling. An amount that transformed my horizon from immediate survival to long-term stability. Are you serious? My voice had gone thin with shock. Completely serious. The driver who hit you was texting, had multiple prior citations, and the company he worked for had been warned about his driving record. They're cutting their losses before this goes to court, where a jury might award much more. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what this meant. Not just bill payments and rent, but potential homeownership in an accessible space. Not just part-time consulting work, but the flexibility to build something meaningful on my own. Terms, not just basic independence, but choices, real choices about my future. What happens now? I finally managed. There's paperwork, of course, but the funds should be deposited directly to your account within 2 weeks. Emma, this changes your situation significantly. Yes, I said, the reality beginning to settle in. Yes, it does. After we hung up, I sat motionless, staring out the window at the courtyard below where another River Point resident was practicing wheelchair maneuvers under the guidance of a physical therapist. The scene, once symbolic of my new limitations, suddenly represented something different, a temporary phase rather than a permanent sentence, a challenge to overcome rather than a life defined. My first thought, surprisingly, was of my parents. What would they say when they learned of the settlement? Would they suddenly find me worth investing in again? Would the daughter they'd abandoned become valuable once more when measured in dollars rather than in convenience? The bitterness of these thoughts surprised me. I'd believed I was moving past the hurt, focusing on reconstruction rather than resentment. But the settlement had unearthed something I hadn't fully processed. The raw knowledge that my own parents had evaluated my worth and found it insufficient. I reached for my phone again, scrolling to my father's contact information. My thumb hovered over the call button. What would I say? That I didn't need them anymore? That money had accomplished what family bonds couldn't? The pettiness of these potential declarations made me pause. Instead, I texted Marcus. Insurance claim approved, $680K. Can we talk? His response came immediately. On my way. While waiting, I opened my laptop and created a document titled Next Steps. The blinking cursor waited expectantly as I considered priorities. Housing topped the list. Something permanent, accessible, mine. Then transportation, a vehicle, adapted to my needs. Professional development, perhaps formal certification in real estate compliance or transaction coordination. And finally, a category I labeled simply living. Funds allocated not just for survival, but for building a life worth inhabiting. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, slightly out of breath as if he'd hurried. That's incredible news, he said, settling into the chair across from me. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed, I admitted. It doesn't feel real yet. It will, he assured me. Once the practical aspects start falling into place. I was just making lists, I said, gesturing to my laptop, trying to be strategic rather than emotional. He smiled. That's very you. The observation caught me off guard. What do you mean? In the 2 months I've known you, you've consistently approached challenges with that same methodical mindset. It's one of your strengths. The casual compliment warmed me unexpectedly, not because I needed his approval, but because it acknowledged a part of my identity that had survived the accident intact, the core of who I was beyond physical capability or financial stability. There's something I've been considering, I said, even before this news. Something I want your perspective on. I turned the laptop toward him, revealing a document I'd been developing in private moments over the past weeks. A business plan for Accessible Spaces Consulting, a service specializing in real estate accessibility evaluations, compliance reviews, and market analysis for clients with mobility challenges. I can't show properties in heels anymore, I explained. But I understand this industry, and now I understand barriers in ways I never did before. There's a market gap here. realtors who don't know how to serve clients with disabilities, property managers unfamiliar with accessibility requirements, developers missing opportunities to build more inclusive spaces. Marcus read through the outline, nodding slowly. This is impressive, Emma. Really impressive. Is it viable, though, or just a way to make myself feel better about what I've lost? He looked up, expression serious. Those aren't mutually exclusive. The best businesses often emerge from personal experience combined with professional expertise. You have both. His validation bolstered my confidence, but practical questions remained. The settlement changes the timeline. I don't have to rush into generating income now. I could take time to do this properly, maybe even get additional certification in accessibility compliance. That sounds like a solid approach, he agreed. The settlement provides runway, not just safety net. There's a difference. We spent the next hour refining ideas, Marcus asking thoughtful questions that helped clarify my vision. When he finally left, called away to another client emergency, I felt grounded in a way I hadn't since before the accident. Not because all problems were solved, but because I could see a path forward that incorporated my new reality rather than merely accommodating it. That evening, I received another unexpected message, an email from my father. Emma, your mother and I have been reflecting on our conversation. We recognize we handled your situation poorly and caused additional pain during an already difficult time. We would like to meet again, perhaps over dinner if you're comfortable with that. Please let us know. Dad. The timing seemed suspicious, given Patricia's news about the settlement. Had they somehow heard already? Or was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, independent of financial considerations? I stared at the message for a long time, conflicting emotions churning beneath the surface. Part of me wanted to respond with cold formality, to maintain the distance their actions had created. Another part, younger, more vulnerable, still craved their approval, their love, even after everything. Before I could resolve this internal debate, my phone rang. Ellie Ramirez. Hey, wheelchair warrior, she greeted me, her usual directness, a welcome contrast to my circling thoughts. Heard about the settlement, want to celebrate? I laughed despite myself. News travels fast. Small community, so dinner? There's a great Thai place near you that doesn't have those annoying high-top tables everywhere. The invitation pulled me out of the spiral of thinking about my parents. That sounds perfect, actually. 2 hours later, seated across from Ellie in a restaurant booth specially designed to accommodate wheelchairs, I found myself relaxing for perhaps the first time since the accident. There was something freeing about being with someone who understood my new normal without requiring explanation or apology. So, she said, reaching for her water glass, 680,000. That's life-changing. It is, I agreed, though I'm trying not to see it as a solution to everything. She nodded approvingly. Smart. Money helps, absolutely. But it doesn't rebuild identity or purpose. That's separate work. My parents emailed today, I said, the words emerging before I'd decided to share them. Wanting to meet. Ellie's expression sharpened. Interesting timing. That's what I thought, though I don't know how they would have heard about the settlement already. Does it matter? She asked. Either way, the question is the same. What do you want from them going forward? It was the heart of the matter, stripped of complication. What did I want? Not what did they deserve, or what social convention dictated, but what would serve my healing and growth. I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to show them I'm fine without them. Another part still wants their approval, as pathetic as that sounds. Not pathetic, Ellie corrected. Human. But maybe there's a third option beyond reconciliation or rejection. Maybe it's about redefining the relationship entirely, not as dependent daughter and authoritative parents, but as adults with boundaries and mutual respect. Her perspective offered a pathway I hadn't fully considered, not returning to the past relationship or cutting ties completely, but building something new that acknowledged both the hurt and the possibility of growth. As we finished dinner, Ellie raised her glass in a toast. To new beginnings, financial, professional, and personal. I raised mine in return, feeling the weight of possibility in the words. New beginnings. Not just survival, but reconstruction. Not just adaptation, but transformation. The settlement money wasn't a happy ending. My parents' potential reconciliation wasn't a neat resolution. My ongoing physical challenges weren't magically erased. But for the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I felt genuinely hopeful about what lay ahead, not despite what I'd lost, but because of what I was finding along the difficult path of rebuilding. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.